The Lake Michigan Jane Doe, 1997, identified as Dorothy Ricker. On October 24, 1997, a woman was found in Lake Michigan against the breakwall in Manistee, Michigan. She was pretty tall, 5'11" and around 200 pounds. They didn't find her name, but they did find an appendectomy scar and an orthodontic bracket on her front teeth. They estimate she was possibly 20 to 60, which is likely too wide to be helpful. Investigators tried to find leads, but nothing happened and it went cold. Investigators tried again in 2020, asking the DNA Doe Project to help, but they found this to be a long process. The Michigan State Police would partner with the project, and they too would hit a wall. The process of getting usable DNA was difficult, but they did it, although it took over a year for them to extract and process usable DNA. But they did it thanks to Astria Forensics. The fortunate part of this is when they uploaded to GEDmatch, they found a close match pretty quickly. The DNA Doe Project eventually contacted the daughter of Dorothy Ricker, requesting her DNA. Her daughter would provide not just a DNA sample, but news articles of when her mom went missing. Dorothy was officially identified in December of 2022. On October 7, 1997, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel had run an article about Dorothy when she was reported missing. At that time, some boaters in St. Francis would report seeing a body in the lake, but it disappeared by the time the police arrived. The article would explain that Dorothy was upset with family members who tried to get her mental health assistance. The article would also explain that on 8 a.m., Thursday, October 2nd, 1997, Dorothy ran out of gas and was given a ride by a sheriff's deputy, who also gave her $10 to fill up her tank with gas. It was later that day officers reported seeing her on the lake, but this was in Wisconsin. It does look like if someone could enter the water on one side and end up on the other, that this was probably the case. We know that Dorothy Lynn Ricker was 26 when approached by the two Lake Michigan police officers. There was nothing to identify the woman at the time other than one earring. An autopsy determined her cause of death to be asphyxia due to drowning, and it was ruled as an accident. Although I personally wonder why she would have no clothes on when she was found, if it was an accident, unless of course she was skinny dipping, which is of course possible. Dorothy Ricker went unidentified for 25 years. She was found 265 miles away from where she originally went missing from. The Jonesport John Doe, identified as Philip Kahn. This is a really strange one. Philip was 84 when he flew from Las Vegas to New York, and then he seemingly vanished into thin air. This was in July of 2000. The same month, on July 24, 2000, the partially skeletonized remains of an unidentified male were found. But these remains were not in New York. They were instead found floating in the Atlantic Ocean between Maine and Canada. He was found about 27 nautical miles away from Jonesport, Maine. They were able to identify a number of medical conditions in the man, such as heart issues and moderate emphysema. He was around 6'2", and his age was estimated as 60 to 65. It would not be until January of 2023 that his name was known, although there was an early try by Parabon Nanolabs. It wasn't a short journey. Parabon became involved in 2019, and they were able to discover his heritage included Ashkenazi Jewish roots, but there weren't any matches that were close enough to identify him. In March of 2022, the FBI began using a special program to identify fingerprints in the case of matches that weren't easily made before. It was able to clear up some of the difficulties in getting a full print, although this is really strange considering it's described as skeletonized. Also, he hadn't been in the water very long, so I suspect that's an incorrect statement in the article. Either way, the FBI's attempt worked, and they would arrive at Philip Kahn's name. Unfortunately, it still doesn't offer much of a picture for his family. It turns out the age estimate was off by 20 years, but truthfully, given his location, I can't imagine it would have made a difference if they were closer. It's highly unlikely his age had anything to do with him not being identified. We know that Philip was 84 when he left Las Vegas and landed in New York City. How he ended up in the water itself is a mystery, and they need someone to come forward with information if anyone knows what might have happened. Philip Kahn went unidentified for 22 years. The Kingman Jane Doe, 1971, also known as Gladys, identified as Colleen Rice. In January of 1971, an unidentified female victim was located in the desert near a dirt road, which was about 2 miles east of U.S. Highway 93 on Hackberry Road. She was found inside a canvas sack that had been tied at the top with white cotton rope. It had words on it that said Deer Pack, Ames, Harris, Neville County, which was printed in green. They believed her to be 35 to 40 and around 5'4" or 162 centimeters tall. She was wearing a U.S. size 14, which in 1971 would have been closer to a size 12, at least in our current sizing. She had orange stretch pants, and on it was a tab reading Symphony, It's What's Happening. This one was in a size 12. Black leather ankle boots and bobby socks, which were likely white. For more than 50 years, investigators have sought her identity. She had expensive dental work, but no matches were made despite sending x-rays various dentists in the area. But no matches were made, and at the time they also checked local hotels and motels. They also compared her to missing person reports in Arizona, California, Nevada, and Utah. But no one matching her description was ever reported missing. For some reason, she wasn't entered into NamUs until November of 2021, which was unfortunate. It moved fast once they had her entered, and Othram Labs funded her DNA through their DNA Solves website, crowdfunding it from people like you and I. Additionally, crowdfunding has been secured to investigate any leads that come up. The Dear Gladys DNA Solves page was advertised and the community opened their heart quickly, funding the case in only 5 days. The testing process began in late 2022. This is one of those that needs the blanks filled in by people who are aware of what she was doing at the time. They know that she was born in 1931 in Portsmouth, Ohio, to James C. Rice and Flossie Truitt. She married a man named William Davis in 1946, which means she was only 15 when she got married. That would mean she was 39 years old when someone took her life. It turns out the information pretty much stops there. They don't know if Colleen had children, though she may have if she married at 15. That said, things were different in 1946, and many people married young. They are looking for the history of William Davis, and that might be a place to start if anyone knows what happened with her husband, or if they were even together for any amount of time. Her family was estranged, and nobody knows why she was even in Arizona. It's been over 5 decades, but someone still alive will hopefully know more. Colleen Audrey Rice was unidentified for 52 years. If she was still alive, she would be 91 today. Monique Doe, identified as Jennifer McAllister. This case takes place in Brooklyn, New York. A woman's hand was found in the park. She'd been dismembered and was located all throughout Calvert Vaux Park, in the Gravesend section of Brooklyn, New York. They estimated her at 20 to 45 years old and around 5'3" to 5'9". DNA phenotyping would suggest she was possibly black, with black hair and brown eyes. But because her head wasn't found, it was just a guess based on genetics. They would find 6 distinct portions of her body, with more found in March. There was a tattoo that they believed said Monique, and that is how her nickname came about, assuming that it may have been her legal name in life. Parabon Nanolabs developed a pretty amazing process that establishes what a person might look like based on their genetics. It's often pretty accurate, and they would find themselves recruited to provide a facial approximation of what the victim may have looked like. Her identity was found using familial DNA, and an article claimed this method was banned shortly after the process, using it to identify possible family links. I looked into it, and all this actually means is that they can't search it through a legal database existing in New York without a judge's approval. They did suspect that they knew who the decedent was. Jennifer McAllister was 33 when she disappeared in 2014. She had a doctor's appointment that was scheduled, but she didn't show up for it. She also had a child whose name was tattooed on her body, but it was not Monique. The tattoo instead said Konique, and this was the name of her son. Konique was 13 when she went missing, and is now 21. He was 3 years older than his brother, who had found himself being raised by his father. It appears he had custody prior to Jennifer even going missing. But as a result, this left Konique feeling abandoned. His brother had family and he did not. It turns out the family tried to report her missing. Her sister, whose name actually is Monique, said that the family was frustrated they weren't allowed to make a report. They were told it couldn't be filed, as she was an adult and not mentally ill. This is a common thread in a lot of these cases, with people not being allowed to be reported missing under the theory they're an adult and they have a right to go missing. There was a theory that she had fallen victim to a state trucker who had been sleeping in his vehicle across an access road off the Belt Parkway. But the reality is that Jennifer lived within a mile of where she was found. So in this case, allowing a missing person report likely would have had her identified almost right away. Monique would explain she was given a phone number to call the authorities. Word traveled pretty quick between them that they believed they had found Jennifer. And after a number of calls back and forth between them, they would realize that what was meant was they had found Jennifer, but she was no longer alive. Hope had swelled and it quickly deflated. Her family would say that once those details were discovered, the goal would shift to finding out who took her life. There is a reward offered through Crime Stoppers. The number to call can be found on the screen at 1-800-577-TIPS. If Jennifer McAllister had lived, she would be 41 today. She was a Jane Doe for 8 years. As always, thank you so much for watching. The current goal for the channel is 20,000 subscribers. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Thank you so much to everybody commenting. Even with just an emoji, it really has made a big difference. Without it, there isn't a channel, so thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves and each other.